The Ammons House, once a charming residence in Gary, gained notoriety due to its dark history. It was a large, aging structure, built in the early 20th century, surrounded by a desolate neighborhood. The house was abandoned in the late 1980s after a series of tragic events and disturbances that left its reputation forever tainted. In 1984, the Ammons family, who had lived in the house for several years, experienced a series of increasingly disturbing occurrences. The family reported strange phenomena: objects moving on their own, cold spots, and disembodied voices echoing through the empty halls. But the most horrifying reports came from the children. The Ammons children, particularly, seemed to be affected by the malevolent presence in the house. They described seeing shadowy figures and felt an overwhelming sense of dread. One of the most chilling incidents involved the youngest Ammons child, who claimed to have been possessed by an unseen force. According to the family, the child spoke in voices that were not their own and exhibited unnatural strength. In a particularly disturbing episode, the child was found levitating above their bed, an event witnessed by several family members. The family, terrified and desperate, sought the help of local clergy and paranormal investigators, but their attempts to cleanse the house seemed to only make matters worse. The situation escalated when the family reported that the disturbances began to impact their physical health. Members of the Ammons family experienced severe nightmares, and some claimed to have seen apparitions and felt invisible hands gripping them. The fear and stress took a toll on the family, contributing to their eventual decision to abandon the house. By the late 1980s, the Ammons house stood empty. It became a local legend, with rumors spreading about its dark past. Over the years, several people who ventured into the abandoned property reported feeling an oppressive atmosphere and hearing unsettling noises. Some claimed to have seen fleeting shadows and felt an inexplicable chill, as though the malevolent presence from the Ammons family's time had never truly left. Despite various investigations and attempts to understand the phenomena, the Ammons house remains a symbol of the unsettling blend of fear and mystery. Its legacy endures as a reminder of the chilling and often inexplicable nature of the supernatural, leaving an indelible mark on those who dare to explore its haunted past. As the Ammons house stood abandoned, its reputation as a haunted site grew. The house, now a dilapidated shell of its former self, became a magnet for thrill-seekers, ghost hunters, and curious locals eager to experience its reputed supernatural phenomena firsthand. In the early 1990s, a group of amateur paranormal investigators decided to spend a night in the house, hoping to capture evidence of the haunting. They set up cameras, audio recorders, and various equipment designed to detect supernatural activity. The group was led by a seasoned investigator named Marcus, who had previously worked on high-profile cases but had never encountered anything as unsettling as the Ammons house. As night fell, the investigators made their way through the darkened, decaying rooms of the house. The floorboards creaked ominously beneath their feet, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. Marcus and his team split up to cover more ground, their flashlights cutting narrow beams through the gloom. In the basement, where the Ammons family had reported some of the most intense activity, one of the team members, Emily, began to feel an intense chill. Her breath became visible in the cold air, despite the summer heat outside. As she reviewed the footage from her camera, she noticed strange, shadowy shapes darting across the screen, moving independently of any visible light sources. Meanwhile, Marcus was upstairs, where the air seemed to grow increasingly oppressive. He felt an inexplicable sense of being watched and heard faint whispers in the dark. As he examined an old, dusty mirror in one of the bedrooms, he noticed something disturbing. The reflection seemed to flicker, and for a brief moment, he saw a figure standing behind him. When he turned around, there was no one there. The most unsettling incident occurred around midnight. The investigators gathered in the living room to review their findings and discuss their experiences. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the investigators' breath became visible. A heavy silence fell over the group, broken only by the sound of the old house settling and the occasional thud from upstairs. Without warning, one of the cameras, which had been set up in the hallway, recorded a series of rapid, disjointed movements. The The footage showed doors slamming open and shut, lights flickering on and off, and objects being hurled across the hallway. The investigators, already on edge, decided it was time to leave. As they packed up their equipment, they heard a deep, guttural growl coming from somewhere within the house, a sound that chilled them to their core. The next morning, as they reviewed the footage and audio recordings, they discovered more than they had bargained for. There were unexplained voices on the recordings, some whispering threats and others pleading for help. The footage from the cameras showed unexplained phenomena that defied logical explanation. News of the investigators' experience spread quickly, adding another chapter to the Ammons House legend. The house continued to deteriorate, its reputation growing with each passing year. Though no one lived there, the property remained a focal point for those interested in the paranormal. Some locals even claimed that the house seemed to call to those who were sensitive to the supernatural, drawing them in with an irresistible, sinister allure. As the years went by, the Ammons House became more than just a creepy story. It turned into a symbol of the unknown and the unexplainable. While the specifics of what transpired within its walls remain a mystery, the chilling experiences reported by those who dared to investigate have ensured that the Ammons House will forever be remembered as a place where reality and the supernatural collide in unsettling ways. The Ammons House continued to lure the curious and the brave into its darkened, decaying embrace, despite, or perhaps because of, its unsettling reputation. Over the next decade, stories about the house spread far beyond Gary, Indiana, becoming a fixture in local lore and attracting the attention of researchers and paranormal enthusiasts from across the country. In the late 1990s, a renowned paranormal research team led by Dr. Lydia Carter, a respected parapsychologist, decided to investigate the Ammons House. Dr. Carter had made a name for herself studying high-profile hauntings and was known for her rigorous scientific approach. Her team included a skeptical physicist, Dr. Alan Reed, and a sensitive empath, Sarah Mitchell. Dr. Carter and her team arrived at the house on a cold October evening. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the house's silhouette loomed ominously against the twilight sky. They set up their equipment, including electromagnetic field detectors, infrared cameras, and high-sensitivity audio recorders. Their goal was to document any paranormal activity while maintaining a scientific perspective. As night fell, the team began their investigation. Sarah, the empath, immediately sensed an intense and malevolent presence. She described feeling as though she was being watched from all directions, her senses overwhelmed by an oppressive force. Dr. Reed, ever the skeptic, dismissed her feelings but noted that the electromagnetic field detectors were picking up unusual readings, spikes of energy with no apparent source. The team split up to cover more ground. Sarah chose to investigate the basement, where the activity had been reported as particularly intense. She descended the creaky stairs, her flashlight casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. As she reached the bottom, she felt an icy hand grip her shoulder, though no one was there. Her heart raced, but she pressed on, recording her sensations on a voice recorder. Upstairs, Dr. Reed and Dr. Carter combed through the bedrooms. Dr. Reed's skepticism began to waver as he experienced unexplained phenomena. A door that creaked open by itself and a sudden drop in temperature that made him shiver despite wearing multiple layers. Dr. Carter, analyzing the data, found compelling evidence. Multiple instances of electromagnetic interference and strange patterns in the audio recordings that seemed to form coherent words and phrases. As midnight approached, the team regrouped in the living room to review their findings. The temperature in the room dropped abruptly, and a dense fog seemed to roll in from nowhere. The audio recordings revealed a haunting melody, a tune that was both melancholic and menacing, interspersed with disjointed voices speaking in a language they could not identify. Suddenly, the house seemed to come alive with activity. Objects began moving on their own. A chair slid across the floor, a book flew off a shelf, and the walls seemed to pulse with an unseen force. The team members, already on edge, were overwhelmed by the sense of a powerful, unseen presence. The atmosphere grew increasingly hostile, and Sarah, in a trance-like state, began speaking in a voice that was not her own, recounting dark and ancient tales that chilled everyone to the bone. Dr. Carter attempted to use a spirit box, a device designed to communicate with spirits, but the responses were unsettling. The voices coming through were angry and disjointed, and one seemed to repeatedly whisper a single word, "Beware." Feeling their safety was at risk, the team decided to end the investigation. As they packed up their equipment, the house seemed to resist their departure. The front door jammed, and the temperature dropped even further. It took all their effort to force the door open and escape into the cold night. The next day, when they reviewed the recordings and footage, they were left with a profound sense of unease. The evidence was both compelling and disturbing. The recordings captured not just voices but what sounded like a conversation between entities, their tone filled with anger and sorrow. The visual footage showed shadowy figures moving in the periphery, and the temperature fluctuations were beyond the capabilities of their equipment to explain. Dr. Carter published her findings, adding a new layer of intrigue to the Ammons House legend. The investigation, while not providing definitive answers, had uncovered new and chilling aspects of the house's dark history. The Ammons House remained a place where reality seemed to blur with the supernatural, its dark and mysterious presence continuing to draw those who dared to confront its haunted past. As the years went by, the Ammons House became a grim monument to the unknown, its story growing with each telling. It stood as a reminder of the limits of human understanding and the chilling possibility that some places might be forever entwined with forces beyond our comprehension. Years passed, and the Ammons House continued to be a source of fascination and fear. Its reputation as a haunted location only grew, and it became a popular subject for paranormal documentaries and articles. However, despite its fame, no one had lived in the house for decades, and it fell further into disrepair. In 2005, the house attracted the attention of a real estate developer named Victor Hayes. Victor, known for his work in restoring historic properties, saw potential in the Ammons House. He was aware of its dark history but dismissed it as mere superstition. Determined to restore the house to its former glory, Victor purchased the property, envisioning a grand renovation. As work began, the construction crew reported strange occurrences. Tools would go missing, workers would hear unexplained noises, and some claimed to see fleeting shadows out of the corner of their eyes. Victor, while skeptical, chalked up these incidents to the stress and exhaustion of a challenging renovation project. One evening, while working late in the house, Victor decided to investigate the basement. He was aware of the reports of heightened activity in this area but was determined to see it for himself. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, he descended the creaky stairs. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old furniture and forgotten relics. As he explored, Victor stumbled upon an old, dusty trunk tucked away in a corner. Curiosity piqued, he pried it open. Inside, he found an assortment of old documents, photographs, and what appeared to be a journal. The journal was bound in worn leather and had a lock that had rusted over the years. With some effort, Victor managed to break the lock and open the journal. The pages were filled with handwritten entries dating back to the early 1900s. The entries told the story of a family that had lived in the house long before the Ammons family. They spoke of strange occurrences and a growing sense of dread that plagued them. One entry stood out, describing a ritual conducted by a family member who was deeply involved in occult practices. It mentioned attempts to summon and communicate with spirits, and a warning that their actions had opened a door that might never be closed. Victor's heart raced as he read these entries. He had always dismissed the house's reputation as local folklore, but the journal's descriptions aligned eerily with the reports of paranormal activity. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Victor decided to conduct his own investigation. He enlisted the help of a local historian named Evelyn Ross, who specialized in the area's history. Evelyn was intrigued by the journal and agreed to assist Victor. Together, they delved into the history of the house and the families who had lived there. They discovered that the occult practices mentioned in the journal had been associated with a secretive cult that had operated in the early 20th century, seeking to harness supernatural forces. As Victor and Evelyn continued their research, the disturbances in the house grew more intense. Workers reported feeling an oppressive presence and hearing unsettling noises that seemed to follow them. Items in the house began to move on their own, and several crew members experienced vivid nightmares involving shadowy figures and ominous warnings. One night, Evelyn decided to conduct a séance in the house, hoping to communicate with any spirits connected to the cult. Victor, although skeptical, agreed to participate. They set up candles and arranged a circle in the basement, where the journal had been found. As the séance began, the air grew cold, and a palpable sense of dread filled the room. During the session, the group attempted to contact any spirits associated with the house. The séance took a dark turn when the candles flickered wildly, and a voice came through the spirit box, chillingly clear. "You should have left it alone." The temperature dropped sharply, and the room filled with an unearthly, mournful wail. The experience left Victor and Evelyn shaken. They decided to halt the renovation and temporarily abandon the house. They consulted with experts in paranormal investigations and occult practices, seeking guidance on how to address the malevolent presence. The consensus was that the house had been a focal point for dark energies for decades, and its history of occult practices had likely intensified the haunting. In the months that followed, the Ammons House was left in a state of limbo. Victor and Evelyn continued their research, but they struggled to find a solution. The house became a symbol of the supernatural's enduring mystery, with its dark history and unsettling presence deterring most from entering its walls. The Ammons House remains a grim testament to the unknown. Its story is a chilling reminder of how the past can reach out from the shadows and how some places might be forever haunted by the forces they've harbored. Its legacy endures, a somber and eerie chapter in the annals of paranormal history. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The Ammons House, now a derelict monument to the supernatural, stood as a ghostly sentinel over its dark past. Victor Hayes and Evelyn Ross, though deeply unsettled by their experiences, were determined not to let the house's haunting lore become just another ghost story. They continued their research, driven by a desire to uncover the truth and potentially put an end to the malevolent forces plaguing the house. In early 2007, Victor and Evelyn received an unexpected visit from a historian named Dr. Samuel Whitaker, an expert in occult history and folklore. Dr. Whitaker had heard about their investigation and offered his assistance. He specialized in ancient rituals and dark practices, and his knowledge was invaluable for understanding the significance of the occult activities described in the journal. Dr. Whitaker reviewed the journal and related documents, and his analysis revealed that the cult associated with the house had performed a series of rituals designed to summon and bind powerful spirits. These rituals, intended to harness and control supernatural forces, had inadvertently opened a gateway to a darker realm. Dr. Whitaker theorized that the rituals had not only attracted malevolent entities, but had also created a lingering connection between the house and this otherworldly dimension. With this new understanding, Dr. Whitaker proposed a plan to close the gateway and neutralize the dark forces. The plan involved conducting a series of counter-rituals and using ancient protective symbols to seal the gateway permanently. The rituals would need to be performed in the house, specifically in the basement where the original rituals had taken place. Victor, Evelyn, and Dr. Whitaker, along with a small team of trusted friends, prepared for the complex and potentially dangerous ritual. They gathered supplies, including ancient texts, protective charms, and ceremonial tools. As the date of the ritual approached, they could feel the house growing more restless, as if sensing the impending confrontation. On a stormy night in March 2007, the team arrived at the Ammons House. The wind howled through the broken windows, and rain battered the roof. They set up their equipment in the basement and began the preparations. As they worked, they noticed an increase in activity. Flickering lights, cold drafts, and disembodied whispers that seemed to come from the very walls. As midnight approached, the ritual commenced. Dr. Whitaker led the ceremony, chanting ancient incantations and drawing protective symbols on the walls and floor. Victor and Evelyn assisted, following the precise instructions and maintaining a steady focus. The air in the basement grew thick with tension, and a palpable sense of dread settled over the group. During the ritual, the house seemed to come alive with malevolent energy. Shadows danced erratically, and the temperature dropped sharply. The team felt an intense pressure, as though they were being watched by unseen eyes. Despite the mounting fear, they pressed on, determined to complete the ritual. At the climax of the ceremony, Dr. Whitaker performed the final incantations designed to close the gateway. The atmosphere in the basement became chaotic, with objects flying off shelves and a low, growling sound reverberating through the room. As Dr. Whitaker completed the last chant, a blinding flash of light filled the basement, and an oppressive force seemed to lift, leaving the room eerily still. Exhausted and shaken, the team concluded the ritual. They carefully dismantled their equipment and left the house, feeling a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The Ammons House, though quieter, remained a place of lingering mystery. The ritual had seemingly quelled the most intense manifestations, but its history and the entities it had attracted left a residual presence. In the weeks that followed, the house continued to be a source of intrigue. Paranormal activity reports diminished, but locals still spoke of the house with a mix of fear and fascination. Victor and Evelyn decided to document their findings and experiences in a detailed report, which they published as a book. The book detailed the history of the Ammons House, the occult rituals, and their efforts to close the gateway. It became a bestseller among enthusiasts of the paranormal, further cementing the house's place in supernatural lore. The Ammons House was eventually sold, and new owners moved in. They were aware of the house's reputation but chose to embrace its history rather than shy away from it. While the house remained a reminder of its dark past, it was also a symbol of the enduring human spirit and the quest for understanding the unknown. The story of the Ammons House endures as a haunting testament to the power of history and the supernatural. It stands as a reminder that some places are forever marked by the forces that once held sway over them, and that the quest for answers in the face of the unknown can lead to profound and sometimes unsettling discoveries. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.